Today we will be reading chapters 3 and 4 of Mercy Watson to the Rescue. Yesterday when we read chapters 1 and 2, we met the main character, Mercy, and Mr. Watson and Mrs. Watson. At the end of the chapter 2 yesterday, the floor was moaning and there was a loud creak. So we're about to see what happened. Chapter 3. Boom! A hole opened under the Watsons' bed. Clack! The Watsons' bed fell into the hole. Mr. Watson woke up. Mrs. Watson woke up. Mercy woke up too. "What the?" said Mr. Watson. "Oink," said Mercy. "It's an earthquake," shouted Mrs. Watson. "It's the end of the world." "Nonsense," said Mr. Watson, but he did not sound very sure. He sounded frightened. Mercy, however, was not frightened. Mercy was hungry. "Oink," said Mercy again. She moved to the end of the bed. Boom! Crack! The bed fell a little further into the hole in the floor. "Don't move," shouted Mr. Watson. "Whatever you do, don't move." Mr. Watson and Mrs. Watson and Mercy held very still. Mrs. Watson started to cry. "I know exactly what we must do," said Mr. Watson. "We must call the fire department. They will rescue us." "But you said we should not move," said Mrs. Watson. "How can we call the fire department if we cannot move?" Mercy recalled her lovely toast-filled dream. She wondered if there was any toast in the kitchen. While Mr. Watson and Mrs. Watson were arguing, Mercy hopped off the bed. Boom! Crack! "Look," said Mrs. Watson, "Mercy has escaped. She is going to find help," said Mr. Watson. "She is going to alert the fire department." Mercy left the bedroom at a gallop. She was in a hurry. She was on her way to the kitchen. She was looking for some toast. Chapter 4. In the kitchen, Mercy sniffed the table. She sniffed the kitchen counter. She sniffed the floor. But there was no toast. There was not even a crumb of toast. Mercy's stomach growled in disappointment. Boom! Crack! "Help us!" Mrs. Watson called. Mercy thought very hard. Where could she get a snack? And the answer came to her. Baby Lincoln always had sugar cookies. Baby Lincoln lived next door, and Baby Lincoln liked to share. Mercy took the kitchen doorknob in her mouth. She turned it. "Help!" Mrs. Watson called again. Sugar cookies, thought Mercy. She stepped outside. Okay, and that's the end of chapter 4. So, our characters have not changed. There's still only the 3 characters, Mercy and Mr. and Mrs. Watson. There is a mention of Baby Lincoln, but we actually have not seen that character yet, so we cannot add him or her to the list. The setting has not changed. The setting is still their house, the Watson house. But we did come up with a problem. We have a problem in this story. And the problem is, so our problem is that the Watson's bed fell into a hole. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Watson think that their problem is solved. Mercy's going to get help, but Mercy's just looking for a snack. So we will have to wait and see how this problem is solved.